I think it's safe to say it's been an interesting offseason for the Dallas Cowboys. You get the news that Jason Witten is mercifully, mind you, for all of us, leaving the Monday Night Football booth and coming back to play for the Cowboys for another year. Just delaying his time to be inducted into Canton, I suppose. But perhaps a pleasant surprise for Cowboys fans is get a legendary name in your organization's history back into the fold. You should be able to contribute something and be helpful in some ways. You get the re-signing of Lyle Collins and Jalen Smith. This cap space that the Cowboys have started to acquire and accumulate. Now they're going to have to start figuring out how to use it. And of course, you had the Ezekiel Elliott saga. Were they going to feed him? Were Jerry and Stephen Jones going to try and stand their ground? Was Ezekiel Elliott going to stand his ground? Was this holdout going to carry over into the season and games were going to be lost and so on and so forth? And Ezekiel Elliott has been signed. He's been given his big money deal, and he will be on the active roster come week number 1. So if you're a Cowboys fan, you've got to be thankful about that, even though you're perhaps wondering what's going to happen with Dak Prescott's contract and eventually Amari Cooper's contract as well. But a lot of focus and discussion about money and contracts, and Marcus Lawrence and the big money contract he got. The problem is when you start to draft well and you find good pieces and you make good moves is you got to start paying these people. It's a good problem to have. And at least the Cowboys are in a position again to where they actually have this problem. That they're not overextending themselves for lesser level players and pretending and hoping that they will be big time guys. They are actually having to sign and re-sign some featured marquee players that are actually worth paying big long-term money. They didn't get a lot of help out of the draft. I wouldn't surmise at this point. Tristan Hill is probably going to be able to contribute the second round pick, the defensive tackle. But obviously, they didn't have the first round pick due to the Amari Cooper trade. And so far, I have to admit, I was wrong. This trade looks like it was genius for the Cowboys. We'll see what happens in 2019 as Cooper goes into a contract year. But not a ton of flux here. Got Dak Prescott going into his 4th year. Ezekiel Elliott's in the fold now long term, going into his 4th year. You've got Amari Cooper was in the program for an entire offseason, training camp, mini camps, so he could become even more familiar with the Cowboys offense. You've got Travis Frederick back, so that offensive line of Tyron Smith and Zach Martin and Frederick. Now you throw in Connor Williams into the mix, and Lyle Collins looks like he's going to be there a long time. Like, you look at this line, and they look like they're going to be a force still for a number of years to come. A lot of continuity there, and continuity is a good thing as you're trying to think about potentially being a contending team, and I think the Cowboys very well could be a contending team here in 2019. When you look at their biggest strengths, so much of what they've been built on success-wise over the past few years has been that offensive line, and they still are a very, very strong unit. And I think they'll be better in 2019 than they were in 2018 due to a variety of reasons. Connor Williams another year in the league. Lyle Collins having the increased certainty of where he's actually going to play long-term. Travis Frederick back in the fold. Like, all of those things help. And if you've got Martin and Tyron Smith healthy for the entire campaign, then this offensive line will still be a top-shelf unit in the league. You've got Ezekiel Elliott. He's a beast. He's one of the very best running backs in the National Football League. He's a true home run threat every time he touches the ball. Then you look at him on defense. For so many years we were talking about Sean Lee, the walking concussion, the walking injury list, but still a really damn good player. Now he's the 3rd best linebacker in that group. You got Jalen Smith, and then you got last year's first-round pick, Leighton Vander Esch, a damn stud. I mean, Sean Lee is a 3rd bit in that linebacking core. That's a really good place to be. That linebacking core is really, 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 really solid. Really solid. And you would expect that they're going to be a big part of whatever the Cowboys do defensively this upcoming season. Some of the concerns I have for them heading into 2019, the receiving group outside of Cooper, Witten comes back. You would think will help a little bit. But is somebody going to, like Michael Gallup, going to step up and become that established number 2 type of target opposite of Cooper? I look at the defense and defensive line. Who's going to provide the edge rush outside of Tank Lawrence? Excuse me. Where's that pass rush going to come from? Is Taco Charlton finally going to show that he's worth a crap? Or is somebody else going to? Or is there not going to be a lot of edge rush outside of Tank Lawrence? And then I look at that secondary, like if I had to, I'm kind of nitpicking here a little bit because I don't think their secondary is that bad at all. But in terms of concerns that you would have, especially with the lack of edge rush that I can foresee potentially with this defense, unless somebody or a couple of somebody step up, that secondary could have some troubles holding up for the amount of time that it could be required for them to hold up. Um, but all in all, a defense under Rob Marinelli is still really good. For the Cowboys, starting off the season, first 3 weeks, they host the Giants. Then they go to Washington and they host Miami. Here's a chance to potentially go 3-0 to start off the season. And if you're the Cowboys and you have designs on winning your division, potential first round bye, maybe home field advantage throughout the playoffs, you gotta handle business there. You got a tough stretch of games in December, weeks 14 through 16, though. So you might want to pick up some of your wins early on in the year because you got to go to Chicago week 14, host the Rams week 15, host the Eagles in week 16. Now, that's a tough stretch of games there. You'd hope to at least beat the Rams at home, and if you can find a way to either beat the Eagles in Philly or the Bears in Chicago, then the Cowboys are probably having a really, really good season, and we're talking about Super Bowl possibilities and aspirations with them. I look at the Cowboys, and to me, on paper, they're the class of the NFC East this year. I think there is a chance that they could be one of the real contenders in the NFC as a whole when it comes to the Super Bowl picture. I think this is an 11-win team, maybe even a 12-win team. Zeke is going to feast all year long. Be curious to see how Dak does in his contract year, but I like the makeup and balance of this team. I think they can do some really nice things this year, and I think that they're going to win this division relatively comfortably.